January 6, 2026, St. Paul, Minnesota. Governor Tim Walz has officially ended his bid for an unprecedented third term. But he has made one thing unmistakably clear. He is not stepping down. At his first press conference since the announcement, Walz faced mounting pressure from Republican lawmakers, federal investigators, and even uneasy Democrats asking the same question. Should he resign? His answer was blunt and defiant. "I'm not going anywhere. You can make all the requests you want. Over my dead body will I resign." The statement set the tone for a combative appearance that offered no apology, no humility, and no indication of retreat, despite what federal prosecutors are calling the largest fraud scandal in Minnesota's history. A scandal of historic scale. At the center of the controversy is a sweeping investigation into alleged fraud across Minnesota's welfare and social services programs. Federal officials say the scope of the theft could exceed $9 billion, dwarfing previous public corruption cases nationwide. Since 2022, more than 90 individuals have been charged, many tied to fraudulent food assistance, daycare, housing stabilization, and Medicaid programs. Prosecutors allege the stolen funds, intended to feed children, house vulnerable families, and treat individuals with disabilities, were instead used for luxury cars, real estate, jewelry, and international travel. Some money was reportedly sent overseas, raising national security concerns. The U.S. Attorney's Office has described the scheme as potentially the largest COVID-era fraud in the United States. Accountability without consequences? Walz has repeatedly stated that the scandal occurred on his watch and that he bears responsibility. "The buck stops with me. I'm accountable for this," he said last month. Yet critics argue his actions contradict his words. While he ended his re-election campaign, Walz refuses to resign and will remain governor for the final 11 months of his term, through January 2027. "I have a year left to improve a record that has made Minnesota better," Walz told reporters, framing his decision as an act of responsibility rather than avoidance. Republicans, however, see it differently. Republicans demand resignation. Democrats grow uneasy. Minnesota GOP leaders have called Walz's refusal to step down unacceptable. House Majority Whip Tom Emmer said the governor's inaction and incompetence harmed every Minnesotan. House Oversight Committee Chair James Comer went further, stating Walz was either asleep at the wheel or complicit. Walz and Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison have been summoned to testify before Congress on February 10th, as federal investigations expand and grand juries continue hearing evidence. Even within Democratic circles, discomfort is growing. Several party insiders are reportedly urging Senator Amy Klobuchar to consider a run for governor, hoping she could restore credibility and stabilize the state's political future. Walz confirmed he recently discussed his decision with Klobuchar, fueling speculation about a potential transition in leadership. Attack instead of apology. Rather than expressing contrition, Walz chose confrontation. He repeatedly attacked former President Donald Trump and Republican lawmakers, accusing them of launching a petty and vile assault on Minnesota. At one point, he issued a stark warning to GOP legislators. "For the next 11 months, expect me to ride you like you've never been ridden to make sure you're doing your job." The rhetoric only intensified criticism, with opponents calling the remarks threatening and inappropriate for a governor overseeing a massive federal investigation. Whistleblowers and warnings. Ignored. Adding to the controversy are allegations from 480 state employees who claim their warnings about fraud were ignored, or worse, punished. According to their statements, whistleblowers faced retaliation while fraudulent payments continued unchecked for years. Critics argue that audits and corrective actions ordered by Walz came far too late after billions had already been lost. National attention and federal fallout. The scandal gained explosive national attention after a viral investigation by YouTuber Nick Shirley, who documented allegedly fraudulent daycare centers operating out of empty buildings while receiving millions in state funds. The video was shared by Elon Musk and praised by Vice President J.D. Vance. Days later, the federal government froze child care funding to Minnesota, triggering nationwide reforms that now require documentation and photographic proof before federal payments are released to any state. A legacy in ruins. Once seen as a moderate Democrat with national potential, Walz's political trajectory has collapsed. A former teacher, football coach, and congressman, he rose to prominence before suffering a crushing defeat on the national stage in 2024. Now, his governorship is defined not by policy achievements, but by scandal. Republicans have even introduced legislation dubbed the Walz Act, aimed at preventing future fraud and strengthening whistleblower protections, ensuring his name remains permanently linked to the crisis. What comes next? With 11 months remaining, Walz now governs as a defiant lame duck amid expanding federal probes, upcoming congressional testimony, and growing public distrust. More indictments are expected. More fraud may be uncovered. Whether he cooperates or resists remains to be seen. But one thing is certain. Tim Walz has chosen to fight rather than fade away. And Minnesota will live with the consequences until January 2027.